Alcatraz, often referred to as the Rock, is an island steeped in legend, history, and mystery. Situated in the heart of San Francisco Bay, this notorious prison was home to America's most hardened criminals, bank robbers, murderers, forgers, and above all, those who refused to accept imprisonment as their fate. For 30 years, Alcatraz was synonymous with cold, relentless justice, and it was believed that no one could escape its grasp. The United States, emerging from the tumultuous Roaring Twenties, Prohibition, and the Great Depression, faced a surge in crime. Escapes from prisons were becoming increasingly frequent, prompting the government to take decisive action. On August 12, 1933, Alcatraz Island was handed over to the Federal Bureau of Prisons, which invested heavily to modernize the old military fort into a state-of-the-art maximum security prison. This facility, designed to be escape-proof, offered no privileges and was reserved for the most incorrigible inmates. Alcatraz's greatest asset was its location, perched on an island in the middle of the bay, nearly 2 kilometers from the nearest shore. The strong currents and frigid waters made swimming to freedom nearly impossible. Inside, the conditions were equally unforgiving. While traditional prisons might have 1 guard for every 15 inmates, Alcatraz had 1 guard for every 3. Prisoners were housed in 4 square-meter individual cells, stripped of their identities, and referred to only by their inmate numbers. Their lives were governed by strict rules, with frequent head counts and cell searches, and the psychological pressure was immense. The only privilege they received was a hot shower, meant to prevent them from acclimatizing to the cold bay water in case they attempted an escape. When Alcatraz first opened, it housed 137 prisoners, most of whom were bank robbers, forgers, or murderers. A year later, this number had grown to 242. Inmates were confined to 3 main blocks, B and C, while Block D, infamously known as the Hole, was reserved for those who violated the prison's stringent rules. Life in the Hole was brutal, with cells devoid of light or furniture, reserved for the most severe punishment. Alcatraz quickly established its reputation as a place where discipline was enforced without compromise, deterring inmates across the country from misbehaving. Despite its fearsome reputation, Alcatraz gradually softened over the years. The atmosphere relaxed somewhat, and prisoners were granted limited privileges, such as playing musical instruments, watching movies, painting, and listening to the radio. However, the facility became increasingly expensive to maintain. Its location on an island meant that natural wear and tear was accelerated, leading to crumbling walls and deteriorating buildings, details that did not go unnoticed by inmate AZ-1441 Frank Morris. Frank Morris arrived at Alcatraz in January 1960 at the age of 33. His criminal record began at the age of 13, with most of his life spent in and out of prison for drug offenses and armed robbery. Known for his above-average intelligence, Frank had attempted several escapes from other prisons before being sent to Alcatraz. Upon his arrival, he was placed in a cell next to inmate AZ-1335, Alan West, who had been at Alcatraz for 3 years after attempting to escape from the federal penitentiary in Atlanta. Frank and Alan had crossed paths before, both having been incarcerated in Atlanta. In Alcatraz, Frank kept a low profile, working in the prison's carpentry shop or library. Meanwhile, new inmates continued to arrive, including the Anglin brothers, Clarence and John, who were also transferred from the Atlanta prison due to repeated escape attempts. By 1961, Frank, Alan, and the Anglin brothers began to spend more time together, particularly during mealtimes, where they discreetly communicated despite the strict no-talking rule. It was during these interactions that the idea of escape began to take shape. Frank had observed the deteriorating walls of the prison and the vulnerable vents in each cell. The plan was straightforward. Dig around the vent, slip through into the unguarded service corridor behind the wall, exit the building, and swim the treacherous 2 kilometers across the bay. The preparations for this daring escape began in December 1961, 6 months before the actual attempt. The first challenge was to obtain tools for digging, then to figure out when and how to dig without being detected, and finally, to conceal their progress over several months. The goal was to create a hidden space behind the wall where they could store the tools they needed for the escape. Each of the 4 prisoners played a crucial role in the plan. One worked in the carpentry shop and managed to acquire old saw blades to start digging into the wall. Their cells were conveniently adjacent, Frank Morris and Alan West on one side, the Anglin brothers on the other. While one inmate dug, another kept watch for guards. One of the prisoners, who was part of the prison's music club, played his accordion for an hour each day, masking the noise of their digging. To conceal the damage, they crafted fake ventilation grills using magazine binders and papier-mâché, which they placed over the holes. The dimly lit cells made these disguises almost undetectable. For months, they dug with stolen saw blades and cutlery smuggled from the dining hall, carefully disposing of the wall fragments during yard time. Once they broke through the wall, they gained access to an unused service corridor behind Block B, which became their secret workshop as they prepared for the next stages of their escape. Their objective was to reach the roof of the building. However, they first needed to explore the building and find a way to leave their cells undetected by the guards. They devised a plan to make fake heads to place on their pillows, creating the illusion that they were sleeping. These heads, crafted from toilet paper and soap, were painted and topped with hair collected by one of the Anglin brothers, who worked as a barber. Exploring the building, they encountered a ventilation fan blocking their path to the roof. To overcome this obstacle, they fashioned a makeshift drill from a stolen vacuum cleaner motor, allowing them to remove the fan and access the roof. Meanwhile, they also had to figure out how to cross the bay, the most dangerous part of their plan. They decided to build a raft from raincoats, which they acquired or stole from the prison laundry. The raincoats were glued together, and the raft would be inflated using an air pump made from the accordion. The night of June 11, 1962 finally arrived. Frank Morris, Alan West, and the Anglin brothers were ready to attempt the impossible, to escape from Alcatraz. At lights out, they placed the fake heads on their pillows, removed the fake ventilation grills, and crawled through the holes into the service corridor. But not everything went according to plan. Alan West, who had not participated in the building exploration, discovered that the hole he had dug was too small for him to pass through. Despite efforts to enlarge it, time ran out and the others had to leave him behind. The remaining 3 inmates continued on, climbing the pipes to the roof, carefully avoiding the searchlights from the watchtowers. They descended from the roof, scaled a barbed wire fence, inflated the raft, and plunged into the cold, dark waters of San Francisco Bay. It was 11 p.m., and that was the last time anyone saw Frank Morris, Clarence, and John Anglin. Alan West, who had finally managed to escape his cell, reached the roof only to find that his companions were already gone. With no equipment and no chance of making it across the bay alone, he returned to his cell. The next morning, during the 7 a.m. roll call, the guards discovered the fake heads in the empty beds. By 8 a.m., a regional alert was issued. 3 prisoners had escaped from Alcatraz.